Hello! In this video, we are going to talk about The Devil and Tom Walker by Washington Irving. Washington Irving was born on April 3, 1783 in New York, and he died on November 28, 1859 in Tarrytown, New York. He is a writer called the first American man of letters, and he is best known for the short stories The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle. Its motto is, "Little minds are tamed and subdued by misfortune, but great minds rise above them." His main themes are freedom, progress, change, migration, and improvement. He shows his writing style by using humor, imagery, and satire with how he used his grammar and word choices. Washington Irving made some contributions. He earned his reputation as a major author by creating the short story. Irving was not boastful about his works. Instead, he had this to say: "If the tales I have furnished should prove to be bad, they would at least be found short." Irving's early works set an example for humorous writing, which later became an important part of American literature. The Devil and Tom Walker is a short story by Washington Irving that first appeared in his 1824 collection, Tales of a Traveler, as part of the Money Digger section. Irving wrote this story as Geoffrey Crayon, one of his pseudonyms.
The Devil and Tom Walker. The story takes place in New England and Massachusetts. Tom Walker takes a shortcut through a tangled, dark, and dingy swamplands. Then he meets the devil, who he calls Old Scratch, at the abandoned Indian fort hidden away. Old Scratch offers Tom riches hidden by Captain Kidd in exchange for his soul, but Tom rejects the offer. Tom's wife confronts Old Scratch. She goes into the swamplands twice, hoping that Old Scratch would make a deal with her instead of her husband. Tom Walker's wife, who was as miserly as him, took all of the values of the second meeting, but she disappears into the swamplands and is never heard from again. In their second meeting, Tom accepts the devil's offer. Later, Tom becomes rich and he moves to Boston and opens a broker's office. Eventually, Tom begins to worry for his soul in the afterlife, so he starts going to church and to be the most zealous of the congregation, but he does not stop his sinful usury. When one of his clients begs him to have mercy, Tom loses his patience and complains, "The devil take me if I have made a farthing." Tom has earned more than a farthing from the man, and so, with his short, straitened exclamation, Tom has sealed his faith. Tom Walker carries a Bible everywhere he goes, hoping warding off Old Scratch. This obviously does not work. One morning, with his Bible under a stack of mortgages, Tom opens the door to find a black horse and a black man who says, "Tom, you're come for." Tom is thrown upon the horse and swiftly taken back to the old Indian fort and gone in a blaze of fire.
Literary devices, metaphor, and implied comparison between two things. Tom looked in the direction that the stranger pointed and beheld one of the greatest trees, fair and flourishing without, but rotten at the core, and saw that it had been narrowly hewn through, so that the first high wind was likely to blow it down. Imagery uses descriptive or figurative language to create vivid mental imagery that appeals to the senses. He had his horse new shod, saddled and bridled, and buried with his feet uppermost, because he supposed that at the last day the world would be turned upside down. Allusion, brief and indirect reference to well-known person, place, thing, or idea, usually of historical, cultural, or literary significance. It was announced in the papers with the usual flourish that a great man had fallen in Israel. Simile, a comparison using like or as. A miserable horse whose ribs were as articulate as the bars of Gideon stalked about a field. Irony, the contrast between that, what expects and what actually happens. The devil take me, said he, if I have made a farthing. Personification. Giving human-like characteristics to non-human objects or abstract ideas. The stranger was neither Negro nor Indian, dressed in a rude half-Indian garb, shock, of coarse black hair, that stood out from his head in all directions, and bore an axe on his shoulder. Satire. The use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize people to stupidity or vices, particularly in the context of contemporary politics and other topical issues. Females called generally considered a match for the devil. Alliteration, the repetition of a consonant, struggling saving tris endless of sterility. Context socio-historical. The Devil and Tom Walker takes place in New England near Boston in 1727, but it was published in 1824. Irving touches events such as the Salem trials and the relationships with the Native American tribes. New England was the biggest colony and center of the Puritans. The collection in which this piece is included was not received well, for its writing was being catalogued as weak and unoriginal. It was a new form of fiction in 1824. The states were still in the process of growing. There were European immigrants, and cultures came together, and new traditions arose as well as new cultures. In 1828, Andrew Jackson was elected president. He took part in the Native American segregation, but displacing them and causing them to starve and die. But the spirits of U.S. Americans were left as Romanticism came to be with travelers that came to the country. Irving took inspiration from them and soon began his own stories about landscapes and the hard work of immigrants.